Hello everyone and welcome to a new video dedicated to our beloved Snoopy and the world of Peanuts. The strip we analyze today, published on November 24th, 1950, gives us a simple but effective moment of humor that manages to combine levity and a little reflection on the fears that any of us, even children, may have about the passing of time. The protagonists of this short scene are Charlie Brown and Patty, two iconic characters from the early stages of the Peanuts. Charlie Brown, with his typical insecurity and self-deprecation, shares a somewhat unusual concern with Patty, who instead represents the practical and rational voice of the situation. The interaction between the two is perfectly constructed to generate a growth of comedy, culminating in a final joke that lightly downplays one of his most recurring fears, the fear of not being good enough, in this case declined in the form of an early sense of old age. This strip is a brilliant example of the way Schulz manages to capture small moments of everyday life and turn them into universal situations with which readers of all ages can identify. Although the theme may seem frivolous, Schulz loads it with deeper meanings, which emerge through the simplicity and genuineness of his characters. In this short scene, Patty is confirmed as a key character in the early strips, offering the perfect counterpoint to Charlie Brown's anxious and reflective nature. The squeaking of shoes then becomes a pretext for exploring a relational dynamic and giving a smile, combining the lightness of childhood with the philosophical undertone that characterizes many of Schulz's works. In the first vignette, we see Charlie Brown who, with a somewhat worried expression, confides to Patty a problem that at first glance seems almost surreal. His joints, he says, creak as he walks. This initial moment is already charged with humor, not only because of the content of the joke, but also because of the seriousness with which Charlie Brown exposes his doubt. The choice of words, creaking joints, is particularly curious for a child, suggesting a very adult and unexpected thought. Interestingly, Schulz uses an oral detail, the creaking, to construct a comic situation, leaving it up to the reader to imagine the noise and to understand that something is wrong with Charlie Brown's perception. Patty, for her part, listens with a neutral, almost skeptical expression that foreshadows her later practical observation. This vignette is crucial in setting the tone of the scene, mixing anxiety and comedy in a perfectly balanced way. In the second vignette, Patty leans forward slightly, carefully examining Charlie Brown's feet, and offers an explanation that immediately unravels the mystery. It is not the joints that creak, she explains, but Charlie Brown's shoes. This moment is a perfect example of the practical and direct logic that characterizes Patty's character, especially in the early strips. Her reaction highlights the contrast between Charlie Brown's tendency to dramatize even the most mundane situations and Patty's ability to bring everything back to a concrete dimension. Here, too, Schulz plays with simplicity, turning a mundane detail, such as the clatter of shoes, into a narrative element that highlights the personalities of the two characters. In the third vignette, Charlie Brown reacts with an expression of deep relief, almost as if a great weight has been lifted from his shoulders. His exclamation, "What a relief," is accompanied by a smile that contrasts with the initial concern, demonstrating once again how Schulz uses the faces of his characters to communicate emotions immediately and effectively. This moment represents the turning point of the strip, where the comic tension melts away and the reader is led to share in Charlie Brown's relief. However, it is also a moment that hints at his deeply insecure nature, always ready to fear the worst, even in situations that turn out to be completely harmless. In the fourth vignette, the scene ends with another line from Charlie Brown, who accompanies Patty as the two walk away. "I thought I had aged," he says, showing how the initial relief has given way to a self-deprecation that is one of his character's defining characteristics. The repetition of the squeaking sound of shoes, underscored by the presence of the word squeak, adds another layer of visual and oral comedy to the scene. Interestingly, Patty does not respond, leaving Charlie Brown with the last word and closing the strip on a light note that invites the reader to reflect with a smile. This final vignette is a perfect example of Schulz's ability to create conclusions that, while simple, leave a lasting impact. Anecdotes, trivia, and insights. One of the most fascinating aspects of the early Peanuts strips is the way Schulz balances humor and introspection, using everyday situations to explore universal themes. In this case, Charlie Brown's fear of the noise in his joints can be seen as a metaphor for the insecurities we all face, regardless of age. Schulz, through his skill as a keen observer, captures these anxieties and translates them into moments that, while comical, resonate deeply with the reader. Patty, in this strip, represents one of the pillars of the early stages of the Peanuts, when the main cast was still being defined. Although her role will later be reduced, here it becomes clear how her presence is crucial to balancing Charlie Brown's character. His practical and direct approach serves not only to resolve the dilemma of the scene, but also to highlight the contrast between his down-to-earth nature and Charlie Brown's tendency to get lost in complex and sometimes exaggerated thoughts. The choice of squeaky shoes as the central element of the strip is an example of Schulz's genius in turning seemingly insignificant details into focal points of the narrative. This kind of detail-based humor is one of the hallmarks of the Peanuts and reflects the way Schulz draws inspiration from everyday life. Interestingly, sound, which would normally be perceived as annoying, becomes the focus of a comic situation here. Another noteworthy aspect is Schulz's ability to capture childhood authentically without ever falling into sentimentality. Although Charlie Brown and Patty are children, their interactions and concerns have a depth that transcends age, making them universal characters. In this sense, Peanuts differs from many other works of the period, offering a portrait of childhood that is both realistic and philosophical. The theme of old age, although addressed in a lighthearted way, is surprisingly recurrent in the Peanuts. Charlie Brown, with his fear of being prematurely aged, anticipates a theme that would be explored more explicitly in later strips, again underscoring the depth and coherence of Schulz's vision.
If you enjoyed yourselves, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the little bell to stay updated, and see you next, friends.